Welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a cinematic journey into an ancient empire built on the most precious natural resource of its era. We're heading back thousands of years to the Kingdom of Hadramawt. This was a civilization that not only survived a brutally harsh environment but mastered it, forging a massive global trading network. It's an epic story of unimaginable wealth, highly sophisticated engineering, and a legacy that honestly still echoes right across the Indian Ocean today. Think about this for a second. For thousands of years, a highly prized, almost magical fragrance drifted through temples, royal palaces, and sacred ceremonies all the way from Egypt to Rome. But where was it actually coming from? Well, very few people in the ancient Mediterranean knew that a huge portion of this priceless incense originated from a wildly powerful Arabian kingdom, completely hidden between rugged mountains, vast deserts, and the Arabian Sea. It was this elusive place of deep mystery, immense wealth, and just legendary caravan journeys.
All right, Section 1, The Secret Fragrance Kingdom.
So, to really understand how they built this empire, we have to look at the geography of ancient Yemen and eastern South Arabia. The Kingdom of Hadramawt was centered around a network of deep wadis, which are basically these massive dry riverbeds that get hit with intense seasonal floods, and some absolutely critical coastal areas along the Indian Ocean. This layout was a strategic gold mine. It let them control the fertile inland valleys and the vital maritime ports all at once. And the timeline here is sweeping. Archaeological evidence, like potsherds dug up from their early capital of Rebun, gives us radiocarbon dates going all the way back to the 12th century BCE. By the 8th century BCE, they're politically consolidated as a major tribal confederation. The kingdom hits its cultural peak around the 3rd century CE, before finally being swallowed up by the expanding Himyarite kingdom around the year 300.
Moving on to Section 2, The Rise of Ancient Shabwah.
Every growing empire needs a powerful center, right? For Hadramaut, that was the capital city of Shabwah, positioned strategically right at the western edge of the Wadi Hadramaut, bordering the incredibly harsh Ramlet as-Sabatayn Desert. This was a true desert metropolis. And it wasn't just some administrative hub, it was a marvel of human adaptation. They built advanced irrigation systems to sustain a huge population in an area that was otherwise incredibly dry. And you can clearly see the wealth that flowed through Shabwah in their artifacts. Take, for instance, a stunning, intricately carved griffin found in the royal palace. The constant transit of merchant caravans through their territory brought in just massive revenues, which allowed the ruling class to commission and show off these exotic, magnificent pieces of art.
Now, as history buffs, we always need to separate historical texts from what the dirt actually tells us. And the archaeology here is phenomenal. Excavations at Shabwah reveal continuous stratigraphy, basically uninterrupted layers of human history from the 13th century BC right up to the 4th century AD. The physical evidence proves they were master engineers. We're talking about sophisticated check dams in Wadi Sana'a designed specifically to capture unpredictable monsoon runoff, alongside massive multi-story buildings that used really complex post and beam wooden frameworks.
Which brings us to Section 3. Masters of the incense trade. So what was actually funding all of this monumental architecture? In a word, aromatics. The cultivation and global export of frankincense and myrrh was literally the ancient world's equivalent of the modern oil industry, and Hadramawt was sitting on the absolute largest reserves. But harvesting it was a totally tangible, incredibly labor-intensive process that happened up in the foggy, mountainous coastal zones. Workers would use bronze tools to make very precise incisions into the bark of the Boswellia sacca trees. Then they'd wait. They had to let the resinous sap slowly bleed out and wait several weeks for it to harden into these translucent little drops they called tears. Finally, this incredibly precious resin was collected, and this was done strictly under royal oversight so the state could maintain its monopoly. And the global scale of their economy, it was just staggering. They perfectly leveraged overland caravan routes and predictable monsoon winds to push their fragrant exports out to the world. And in return for their frankincense, myrrh, and spices, they imported the ultimate luxuries: Roman gold, insanely fine silks and cottons, and Indian spices like pepper. Through massive ports like Karani, their ships were sailing directly to Western India and East Africa. They weren't just participating in ancient trade, they were the absolute beating heart of it. Section 4. Language, Culture, and Society. You know, a kingdom of this magnitude doesn't just leave behind ruins, it leaves a profound cultural footprint. At the center of that was their unique Semitic language, Hadramitic, which was used from roughly the 7th century BCE all the way to the late 3rd century CE. To write it down, they used something called the Muznid script. This was a 29-letter consonantal alphabet, and it was monumental, literally. It was carved almost exclusively on highly durable materials like stone slabs and bronze for royal decrees, religious dedications, and military records. For scholars today, this epigraphic evidence is just an absolute goldmine, letting us accurately reconstruct their royal chronologies and track political alliances that would otherwise be totally lost to time.
Actually, here's something I find deeply fascinating. Their language physically adapted to their economy. For example, they had a highly specialized Hadramitic word, libne, which was used to denote only the absolute highest quality varieties of frankincense. And because their ports were constantly buzzing with international merchants, Hadramatic naturally absorbed Greek and Aramaic loanwords over time. It was a highly dynamic, adaptable culture built on global connection. Let's look at Section 5, the desert skyscrapers of Shabwah.
Even after the ancient capital of Shabwah eventually fell to ruin, the people there didn't just fade away. They adapted. They built an enduring architectural marvel that succeeded it, the incredibly famous city of Shibam, often called the Manhattan of the desert. Just imagine the visceral reality of this place. You have these towering mud brick skyscrapers, some reaching up to 15 stories high, catching the glowing desert sunset, all guarded by these immensely heavy, studded wooden doors. Constructed entirely from sun-dried mud bricks and covered in protective plaster, this fortified city on the trade road is a direct architectural evolution of the ancient monumental building techniques of Hadramaut. Because space was severely limited inside the city's fortified walls, the society had to get creative with vertical living. The internal structure of these towers is brilliantly organized. The ground floors, which had the thickest protective walls, were used for storing grain and keeping livestock. Move up to the 2nd and 3rd floors, and you'd find the men's quarters, called kodor. The 4th and 5th floors housed the women in the kitchens, while the highest, breeziest floors were reserved for the broader extended family. It is just a masterclass in urban density, designed centuries ago.
Section 6, decline and enduring legacy.
But, as we know, no empire lasts forever. Around 300 CE, the Kingdom of Hadramawt was finally conquered by the expanding Himyarite kingdom under King Shammar-Uharsh. Their political sovereignty ended, and they were folded into a unified South Arabian realm. But that is definitely not the end of the story. The Hadramiti people formed a massive, highly influential diaspora. From the medieval period onward, Hadramiti traders, scholars, and migrants traveled the very same Indian Ocean networks that their ancestors had built, spreading out into India, East Africa, and Southeast Asia. They carried their culture with them, preserving South Arabian customs and unique architectural styles well into the modern era. In fact, today UNESCO is actively working to preserve those incredible ancestral high-rises in Shabwah.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. When we map out today's hyper-interconnected global economy, stretching from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean and all across the Indian Ocean, are we really just traveling the descendants of the ancient paths forged by those very first Hadrami incense caravans? It is absolutely wild to think that a kingdom built entirely on the fragrance of tree resin helped lay the foundation for the globalized world we all live in today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the history beneath our feet.